Strange lights can be seen in the night sky above the Place Bonaventure Hotel. On November 7, 1990, a tourist floating in the hotel's 17-story rooftop pool saw something which set off a chain reaction. It was 7:20 p.m.
She saw a very hard aerial phenomenon, and she was surprised, so she asked the lifeguard to have a look at it.
Bernard Guénette has chronicled the events of that night.
She was also very surprised by what she was seeing, so she called the hotel security officer, and as soon as he saw the aerial phenomenon, was overwhelmed and called immediately the police.
Quelqu'un demandait, est-ce un objet non identifié?
Jules Béliveau, a reporter with La Presse, was also dispatched to the scene. He happened to ride the hotel elevator with a policeman.
We were going up, you see. He asked, may I use my gun? You see? It was just a joke, and people were laughing. I was laughing. When we arrived together on the roof, he looked in the sky and he said, "Sacrement." He was astonished, like I was.
On a vu une forme ronde qui semblait métallique, qui projetait des faisceaux lumineux qui avaient 4 séries de 3 phares. C'était gigantesque.
He decided that he have to call his big boss. And so the big director of all operation of the police that night arrived also on the scene and was overwhelmed by what he was seeing. So he called the RCMP.
I got here at the hotel at about 9 o'clock, and I came up, met Sergeant Masson and a lot of people around the pool. We were looking up. On a des petites lumières en haut. I contacted the airport, the military. I talked to the colonel in charge of Saint-Hubert military operations, and I was told that there was no Canadian military operation going on. I also confirmed with Dorval and Mirabel if they had anything on radar, and they answered in the negative.
But yet you could see something there and nobody could say
Absolutely.
what it was?
Yes, absolutely.
À ce moment-là, il y avait le mille de la Gauchetière qui était en construction, qui avait déjà mis ses tours, puis tout le système là, de grues pour monter les marchandises. Lui, il y avait beaucoup de grosses lumières blanches là, pour éclairer le chantier de construction. À ce moment-là, j'ai envoyé des policiers faire fermer les feux. Les phares, on les a fait éteindre. Puis ça n'a rien changé dans l'aspect du ciel. On voyait encore la forme ronde, on voyait encore les lumières tout le tour.
Then we had no answer. Some people were saying, yes, it is something from the space.
At 9 o'clock that night, Béliveau's colleague, Marcel Laroche, took this photograph of the apparition.
So it was a build-up. More and more witnesses, more and more action, and always the same. The phenomenon doesn't change.
The sighting had lasted almost 3 hours, from 7:20 to 10:10. The next morning, the La Presse story caused a sensation.
The morning after, I was working, and we had a lot of phone calls from media and also from various people out of the public. And we had nothing to answer, really, so I had to make a little investigation.
Marc Gélina is a meteorologist with Environment Canada and an amateur astronomer. He believes the lights which caused the commotion were nothing more than northern lights, technically an aurora borealis.
More than one people, at least 3 witness reports an aurora because they know aurora. And their description of the phenomena is the same as the other description from general witness. But somebody that don't know the sky well, which is not very skilled in reporting something in the sky, could be fooled by light in the sky.
Bernard Guénette wasn't so sure. He'd seen the lights himself that night while leaving his office in Old Montreal.
I saw that very hot light that was straight between these 2 buildings. It was a greenish light, which looked like Borealis aurora, but doesn't move like these northern lights usually, moves.
Guénette owns a computer company, but devotes much of his spare time to the study of UFOs.
Other side, to look into this case, since a lot of witness was there. The quality of the witness was very good, and there were also photographic evidence that was there. So I said to myself, there's probably ways, with the collection of the meteorological data, the witnesses' testimony, and the photograph negative that could be maybe analyzed to determine if it was a light reflection or an object.
Gannett collaborated with Dr. Richard Haynes, a retired NASA research scientist in California. Haynes directed the research. Gannett collected the data and interviewed key witnesses who had been present on the roof of the hotel. But they were not the only people who saw something unusual that night. Pierre Comartin was driving home from work between 10:30 and 11 o'clock when something caught his attention.
I could see something, some kind of a flying object on top of the Olympic Tower right there, which is very well lit.
At first, he thought it was a promotional blimp surrounded by very bright lights.
And that thing was basically going east as I was. From here on, I figured out that this thing must have been pretty big, pretty darn big, because there was no blimp. I can't define the type of object. I can't. I've never seen anything like that.
Perplexed, he stopped here, near his home in Anjou, and continued his observation.
The lighting was definitely very strong. It was definitely big. I could hear from here, and this is where I heard the sound of the object. It was like some kind of a neat purring sound. Just a little rhythmic purring. And the way this thing was moving was very strange because it was very static. It could be very static, wouldn't budge. And then it would like glide and go down very fast.
Comartin watched it hover in the vicinity of a neighborhood power station.
And basically the Hydro-Quebec station should be just about around there.
And I found out later on that during the time of his observation of that phenomenon above that station, a power failure occurred. And oddly enough, it is a route which goes to the, which feed the Long Point military base.
Gannett and Haynes published their report in 1992. Gannett had collected an exhaustive amount of data, much of it meteorological. Haynes had done the analysis. His conclusion? The evidence for the existence of a highly unusual, hovering, silent, large object is indisputable. There is nothing about these particular meteorological conditions that could produce an optical effect of the kind described by these witnesses.
It's a perfect inquiry, except the conclusion. The strongest aurora happens quite often like a crown, like a spot of light with rays emitting. So you look at that and look at this and try to make a drawing a day after or so. You will probably find something like that.
Why isn't there any record of this particular phenomenon that night?
Well, that's still some problems. There is no report, no observation by objective device of activity in the magnetosphere that night. But according to some authorities in Aurora, it could be a localized phenomena.
The photographs were also analyzed, and special tools at NASA were used to look at that. Okay, this is a 3D rendering of the negative, and this is what we are seeing here. And this is the scan which goes, through it to try to find out if we are talking about an object or just a reflection. Conclusion, it was an object.
This was no atmospheric, situation or... No, I saw an object. I saw light in an object.
Nobody talked about extraterrestrial. Everybody was very careful about this. But it was a very strong impression that something odd, something out of this world was present in this world.
I won't turn around and say, yes, now I believe in UFOs and life on other planets. But since the sighting on November, I have to admit that once in a while I'll look up there.